My friends, let's talk about something most people don't want to admit. What silence actually does to someone who took your attention for granted. When someone gets used to your presence, they stop registering its value. It's not because they're heartless, it's because they're human. Familiarity breeds blindness. The brain filters out what's constant and starts chasing what's scarce. Human psychology is wired for contrast. We often don't realize the value of something until it's no longer within reach, whether romantic, platonic, or professional. The moment a consistent presence becomes distant, the mind begins to panic, not because of love necessarily, but because of disruption. You've interrupted a pattern, and that's when awareness begins to form. We are creatures of habit, and in relationships, habits are built through repeated behavior, texts, conversations, emotional support, shared jokes, attention. When that rhythm is broken, the brain doesn't just notice it, it questions it. What changed? Did I do something? Why don't I feel as seen as I did before? These questions start surfacing not because someone is inherently reflective, but because you've created contrast. You've introduced absence into a space that used to be filled with consistent emotional input. And that absence becomes the very thing that forces the other person to see what they were blind to. When you're always available, always initiating, always responding, your presence becomes assumed. And when something is assumed, it's not felt in its full depth. Think of it like background noise. At first, you notice the music playing in the coffee shop, but after a while, it fades into the background. Now imagine the music stops mid-song. You'd immediately notice the silence. That's what ignoring does. It breaks the background music someone has been taking for granted, and suddenly they hear the silence they never knew was there. People don't remember every kind thing you said, they remember how you made them feel. But here's the twist. Sometimes they don't even feel the depth of what you brought to the table until you're no longer at that table. The conversation they used to half engage in, now it's not happening. The support they got used to relying on, now they have to face challenges alone. The person they knew was always just a call away, that call doesn't come. In that contrast, in that unexpected change, awareness blooms. And this isn't about punishment, this is about clarity. When you step back, you give someone the chance to truly experience what your presence meant. Sometimes we're too close to be seen. Constant exposure makes someone forget they're lucky. So when you stop showing up, it's like taking the painting off the wall. Only then do they realize how much color it was adding to the room. Emotional investment doesn't just disappear. It leaves an impression. And when you remove yourself, you leave behind an emotional outline, your shape, your energy, your consistency. That outline lingers, and the space you used to fill becomes a mirror. People are forced to confront not just your absence, but their role in creating it. The more someone was unconsciously relying on your validation, your energy, your presence, the more they feel the impact of it being gone. That's the paradox. When you were there, it was comfortable, but invisible. When you're gone, it becomes vivid. Ignoring isn't about turning cold. It's about stepping into self-respect. It's understanding that your energy isn't free. It's a gift. And when someone has grown too comfortable receiving it, contrast is the only way to help them remember its worth. So yes, he feels it, not always immediately, but definitely deeply, because silence is not emptiness, it's a mirror. And once someone's reflection shows up in that silence, they can't ignore what they see. Attention is a form of emotional currency. Just like money, it's exchanged, invested, and carries weight. In relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, attention serves as a signal of care, interest, and value. The more we give it, the more it shapes the dynamic. But what many people don't realize is that, like currency, when it's spent too freely or too frequently without balance, it begins to lose its perceived worth. When you consistently give someone your attention, whether that's through messages, support, check-ins, or simply showing up, they become accustomed to it. It creates a psychological expectation, a baseline that now defines your role in their life. Over time, that baseline becomes so predictable that it fades into normalcy. You're no longer seen as giving something valuable, you're just being there. But when you begin to withdraw that attention, not in a punitive way, but in a conscious, self-respecting way, That's when the shift happens. That's when your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Think about it. How do we recognize the value of something we use every day? Often, we don't. It's only when it's missing that we realize how foundational it was. Your attention, your emotional currency, worked the same way. And when you stop offering it as freely, the person who once received it without thinking suddenly feels the loss in a visceral way. This withdrawal causes a recalibration. The other person starts mentally and emotionally auditing what they had and what's changed. That space, that silence, that pause, it acts like a receipt. Suddenly, they see what they were getting, what they were using, and what they didn't appreciate. And the powerful thing is, your silence doesn't accuse, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. It simply reflects. It holds up a mirror to the imbalance. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that if you're not speaking, if you're not reaching out, then you're not doing anything. But emotional currency works in both presence and absence. Just like the stock market reacts to market silence or fluctuation, people react when your attention stops showing up in their emotional economy. That gap, that's when your value becomes unmistakably felt. And here's the real lesson. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your attention. You have to assess where your energy is truly received and reciprocated. When someone becomes complacent with your attention, when they begin to expect it rather than appreciate it, that's a signal. It means your currency is being spent in a place where it's not being invested wisely. Pulling back isn't about playing games or trying to get a reaction. It's about recalibrating the balance of energy. It's about showing someone that what they were receiving from you wasn't guaranteed. It was given. Freely, yes, but still given. And what's given can also be withheld, especially when it's not being valued. Silence gives people space to sit with their thoughts. And that's where awareness truly lives. Without constant feedback from you, they're forced to reflect. They replay old conversations, remember things you said, re-experience the warmth they received from you, but maybe never truly acknowledged. That gap becomes fertile ground for realization. Realization of what they had, realization of what they took for granted, and sometimes realization of how they contributed to you stepping back. Most people don't realize they're ignoring something until it's no longer accessible. Your silence becomes a catalyst for awareness. It makes them notice not only your absence, but also their own behavior or lack thereof. They start seeing the imbalance that was easier to overlook when you were constantly showing up. Without you reinforcing the connection, they're left to question whether they ever really reciprocated it in the first place. And it's not just about missing you. It's about being confronted with the emotional gap you once filled. It's about feeling the weight of what they no longer have access to. That discomfort, that's where growth can begin, for them and for you. Because silence isn't just a message to the other person, it's a message to yourself. It says, I don't need to explain why I'm stepping back. I just need to protect my peace. There's power in letting the absence speak for you. It doesn't manipulate, it reveals. Silence holds a mirror up to both people. One sees what they've lost, the other sees what they've reclaimed. And in that stillness, there's wisdom. You learn how much noise you were tolerating, how much energy you were giving away, and how much you were doing to keep something going that wasn't being nurtured equally. So when you go quiet, intentionally, respectfully, and with self-respect, it's not passive. It's purposeful. It's the most honest kind of communication. Because in that void, people don't just hear the silence. They hear everything they never truly listened to before. Emotional availability creates emotional value. When you make yourself emotionally available to someone through your time, energy, empathy, presence, you are offering something far more powerful than just words or actions. You're giving access to your emotional world, and that access, though often invisible in the moment, carries immense weight. The more available you are, the more someone comes to rely on your energy as part of their emotional stability. But here's the catch. When something is always available, people tend to stop recognizing its value. It starts to blend into the background. It becomes expected rather than appreciated. Your consistency turns into something they think they can count on without question and eventually without effort. The warmth you offer, the listening ear, the safe space, they feel good in the moment, but over time they're absorbed without reflection. take that emotional availability away, gently, not out of spite, but out of necessity, and something shifts. Suddenly, the person who once relied on your openness is left with a void. They can't quite place it at first. Maybe they assume you're busy. Maybe they tell themselves it's just a phase. But as time passes and that emotional tap remains closed, the difference becomes undeniable. The energy you once gave so freely now has a cost attached to it, your self-respect. You were the one who was emotionally present, maybe even when it wasn't reciprocated. You asked how their day was, even if they never asked about yours. You cared when they seemed indifferent. You listened, supported, showed up. Your presence was soft, steady, comforting. And that emotional reliability became a cushion they didn't even realize they were leaning on until you stepped back. And when you pull back that emotional availability, it creates emotional contrast. The person who once felt emotionally held by your presence now feels exposed, not because you did something harsh, but because they were unconsciously relying on something they never acknowledged. Your absence forces them to confront the emotional safety they had and now lack. That safety wasn't built on grand gestures, it was built on your consistency, on the way you responded with care, on the way you made space for their emotions, even when yours were being overlooked. There's something incredibly powerful in realizing that you were someone's emotional anchor, whether they knew it or not. And there's something even more powerful in deciding when it's time to let go of that role. Because when your energy is no longer available, the space you leave behind becomes undeniable. It forces the other person to reflect not just on your value, but on their own effort or lack of it. You can't force someone to value your emotional availability while you're constantly giving it. People often need to feel the loss of it to realize what it truly meant. That's why your absence carries weight. It's not about punishing someone, it's about giving them the space to finally see what you were offering all along. And while they're sitting with that realization, you're not shrinking, you're not waiting, you're standing in your own emotional truth, because your availability is a gift, not a guarantee. It was never owed to them. It was offered out of care, love, and presence. But the moment it stopped being seen for what it was, it became necessary to protect it. So when you step back, know that you are not being cold. You are being clear. You are showing, not telling, that your emotional world has value, and that anyone who wants access to it has to respect the privilege, not just enjoy the comfort. Ignoring isn't manipulation, it's reflection. In relationships, especially ones where emotional imbalance exists, taking a step back is often misunderstood. People assume that silence or distance is meant to provoke, to punish, or to play games. But in reality, when done from a place of self-respect rather than control, pulling away is not about getting a reaction. It's about creating space for truth to surface. There's a critical difference between intentional disconnection and emotional sabotage. Ignoring someone in the manipulative sense is about trying to make them feel bad, trying to force them into chasing you. But ignoring, when rooted in clarity and boundaries, is about giving them the opportunity to see what they wouldn't recognize while you are constantly present. It's not a strategy, it's a signal. It says, I'm done trying to be understood in a space where I'm not even seen. Reflection happens in silence. When words stop, people are left with their own thoughts. That's when accountability has a chance to show up. When you're no longer filling the space with reminders of your care, your effort, your presence, the other person finally faces the reality of what you were giving, and more importantly, what they were doing with it. People won't reflect until they're confronted with a gap. As long as you're showing up, texting, calling, checking in, they can keep operating on autopilot. They don't have to think deeply about how they're treating you because they're still receiving the benefit of your emotional labor. But the moment you step back, that routine is broken. And now they're not just reacting to your absence, they're reflecting on their own role in creating it. You're not just protecting your energy, you're teaching through contrast. You're letting your absence reveal the imbalance your words couldn't fix. And if they truly care, if they're genuinely capable of seeing you clearly, that space will bring them face to face with what they've been overlooking. This approach isn't cold, it's courageous. It requires you to trust in your value enough to stop trying to prove it. It demands that you resist the urge to fill every silence, fix every miscommunication, and fight to be understood by someone who hasn't even tried to understand themselves. Because when someone isn't ready to reflect, all your effort becomes noise. But when they are ready, your silence becomes the loudest truth they've ever heard. It's not about punishing them. It's about choosing you. It's about creating space, not for drama, but for depth. And whether they rise to meet it or not, that space will always say more than chasing ever could. When someone begins to feel your absence, they often realize the presence they once overlooked. But here's the deeper truth. It's not just your presence they miss. It's the emotional impact you had on them. That impact doesn't vanish the moment you walk away. It lingers. It echoes. It's felt in the small moments, in the silence where your words used to be, in the quiet where your support once lived. People might not always understand it immediately, but over time, they come to feel the imprint you left behind. Emotional impact isn't about dramatic gestures. It's not built on grand moments or impressive words. It's the cumulative effect of your energy, your consistency, your empathy, your warmth. It's the way you made someone feel safe, seen, or even just less alone. You might have been the one they turned to without realizing they were turning, the person who made things feel a little lighter, who gave them a moment of peace in their chaos. When you remove yourself from that equation, what they miss isn't just you. It's how they felt when you were around. That's what creates emotional residue. It's the memory of how it felt to be cared for in a way they didn't fully appreciate at the time. And it doesn't just disappear because you stop texting or calling. The absence becomes a contrast, and in that contrast, your emotional fingerprint remains. They may not reach out. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it every time they face a moment you would have softened. Every time they look at their phone and expect your name, then realize it's not there. Even if they try to replace your presence, what they're really looking for is the feeling you brought into their life. That's the part they'll struggle to recreate, because emotional impact isn't easily duplicated. It's not about being perfect. It's about being genuine. And when your energy came from a place of authenticity, it formed a connection deeper than surface level attraction or temporary comfort. That's why they feel it long after you've stepped away. It's also why silence can be so powerful. It allows that impact to rise to the surface. When you're no longer there, the contrast becomes unavoidable. And in that quiet, they start to notice the gaps you once filled. You become the unspoken standard, not because you tried to prove your worth, but because your presence naturally raised the emotional bar. But here's the most important part. Their realization is not your responsibility. You didn't create emotional resonance just to be validated. You gave what you gave because it was real. The impact you left isn't something you have to chase or remind them of. Time and distance will do that for you. They'll feel it when they face something hard and instinctively reach for your comfort only to find silence. They'll feel it when they try to connect with someone else and discover it's not the same. Emotional impact doesn't demand recognition, it simply remains. And when someone finally sits with that feeling, the one they used to get from being around you, they'll understand, perhaps too late, what your presence really meant. You can't control how long it takes for them to realize it. You can't rush their awareness, but you can choose to protect the part of you that gave so deeply in the first place. When you walk away with dignity, your emotional impact becomes your legacy in their mind. And that's something no silence can erase. The more you ignore him, not out of bitterness, but out of self-awareness, the more he begins to feel everything he once took for granted. Your absence becomes his lesson. Your silence becomes the echo of everything you once gave so freely. This isn't about games. It's not about trying to make him chase you. It's about honoring your energy and knowing your worth. Because when you stop overextending yourself, when you stop filling the silence with effort and explanations, you give him the opportunity to truly see you, maybe for the first time. He may not say it, he may not show it, but he feels it, the difference, the gap, the missing piece that was never just your presence, but the emotional weight behind it. And whether or not he comes back, whether or not he ever fully understands what he lost, you will have done something powerful. You chose yourself. You stopped trying to be heard and started listening to your own silence. And in doing so, you reclaim